So if you have more than that, sort of your basic needs covered, you should and could, and maybe you are even obliged to share some of your wealth, because you don't need it. You have what you need.
Welcome to the Mahrberg podcast, Redefining Wealth, where we sit down with inspiring personalities, give insights into the world of Mahrberg, and try to redefine and think about what wealth really means. My guest today is a very special person of the Mahrberg environment. Anne Wilson is director of the nonprofit organization Mahrberg Library and a big advocate for women empowerment. Thank you very much, Anne, for sitting down. How are you doing today? The sun is shining. We see the beautiful Alps here in Liechtenstein. How are you doing?
I'm good. I woke up early this morning and did a little bit of run up the hills. So I'm feeling good and energized. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I envy you. I wouldn't have the power to do a workout at 5 a.m., but that's who you are, and that's really cool. And you traveled the world and lived in many huge cities. How do you like the small Vorarlberg where you're living?
Yeah,
right now?
I lived in a couple of cities. Amsterdam was the last one, and I lived there actually for 20 years. So coming to Vorarlberg last year was a big change, but a welcome one. And I must say, I really enjoy the nature around here, and the weather is much better than the Netherlands. It rains far less. And it's just so beautiful. It's really beautiful here. So yeah, I
a little
like
more mountains than in the Netherlands.
For sure.
So I know you, Anne, for sure, but many of our listeners don't. So can you tell us a little about your background and how did you become part of the Mahrberg family eventually?
How long do we have? No. I was born in Korea, in South Korea, and adopted by Danish parents. And so at the age of 2 months, I arrived in Denmark, and I grew up in Denmark my whole life. So I'm Danish, also a very flat country, had a great childhood, except, it was a different time when I was a child, and especially out in the countryside. There weren't a lot of, say, non-Danish people. It was very blonde and very blue-eyed, and I experienced a lot of bullying, actually, which I didn't quite understand because I hadn't done anything. So it was a weird experience, weird feeling as a child when you feel sort of ostracized from your immediate environment, and people are, go back to your own country, and saying all these awful things. So I did actually, I had a good childhood with my family and friends, etc. But sort of the greater environment was tough, at least in the beginning. Essentially, I think that's probably why I feel so strongly as well about empowerment of people in general, not only women, but people in general, just because when you're in a situation where you feel that you are nobody, it's so important that somebody believes in you and that someone say you can do it. So anyway, then I spent some time traveling, studying, and actually 1.5 years ago, I met with your family, and there was this opportunity to come and work for Mahrberg Library, and that was, for me, a great possibility to change from sort of the corporate world, which I had been in for 15 plus years, to really switch full-time into the nonprofit world, and I'm very grateful for the chance.
So we are very grateful to have you as part of the Mahrberg family. So your childhood also, in a way, drove you into this fear that you wanted to give back and help children in need correctly?
Yes, I mean, my parents were very supportive, and they were very much like, you can do anything, and we will support you, and, don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. So I'm grateful for that, and I do, growing up, I still have that belief, but it was so contradicting with the world coming at me saying, we don't want you here, you are different, you don't look like us, and why are you here, kind of thing. And I remember, so one of the sort of first things I did probably in the women's empowerment world was our local football club didn't have a girls team. And I was very sort of angry about that. It's like, that's not fair. Girls can play football. And so a friend and I went to the club manager and asked him, why is there no football team for girls? And he said, well, you're welcome to form one, find girls who want to play and someone who wants to train you, and you can set up a team. And it's like, we will. So, okay. And then we went out and recruited girls and found a woman who didn't mind coaching us or training us. And yeah, then we started from there. I only played 1 year because playing football wasn't really in my heart, but it was more about this unfairness of not having a football team for girls. So after that year, I went back to handball and volleyball, which I enjoyed playing much more.
Such an inspiring story.
So yeah.
Do you think that the world is changing that way as well? Because there's a lot of movements right now where people who think they don't belong to a group, that they stand up and speak out. Do you think the world is changing?
I don't know if it's changing. It depends on, which year or which time do you compare it to. So if you compare it to 1504, yes, we are changing. If you compare it to 1970, I think it's not changing so much. It's more about also these minority groups, as you would probably call them, having a bigger outlet to the rest of the world. Like social media, for sure, has made that possible. So in the times before media was really something penetrating everybody's lives, the message was difficult to get out on a global level. So you would have maybe LGBT activists, but more campaigning and being known in their own area, like locally. Now with Black Lives Matter, for instance, it started in the US, but has had this major ripple effect across the world because of media and because we can sort of, the distance, the virtual distance is almost none these days. So I don't know if the world is changing. And it is, obviously. It's an interesting question. The fact that maybe the focus on empowerment have been more significant in the last 50 years has made or caused these changes so that people do feel, okay, I am whoever I am and I have a right to be that and be treated just like the majority of people. So
are you confident that we're moving into the right direction?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. That's good to hear.
With a couple of setbacks. But I think on the bigger scale, we are, as a humanity, moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and you spoke about an important point. I think also virtuality can bring us together eventually if we use it correctly. Because you said the power of social media as well. And that's also why we do this, to spread messages, to spread our values. It's very important too.
Yeah.
So now you are part of a very special community, the Mahrberg Library community. Can you tell us a little about what's Mahrberg Library's mission and what did we achieve so far and where we are heading as well?
So Mahrberg Library was set up in June 2018 with the purpose of providing free access to educational material for underprivileged kids. And at the same time, also building global relationships, because exactly that, building relationships will, encourage peace. Because if you know people, you don't have to be afraid of them. You don't have to fight them. They are your friends, or they're part of an extended family. And this is part of, I think, what we want to achieve as well with Mahrberg Library, to really spread the message of community, togetherness, and that, together we are strong and we can achieve a better world.
That's so cool. I just remembered the speech of Julian at our last webinar, Talks from the Hearts, where he said, Julian is one of our volunteers, where he said that Mahrberg Library is for him diversity. It's the place for him which brings people together, where everyone is equal. And I think it shows really how devoted our volunteers are as well, and what Mahrberg Library means to them.
Yeah,
right?
I think there are two sides in our projects. One is obviously the project itself, the core of providing the educational infrastructure, or the access to it for children who might not otherwise have the access. And that is very beautiful in itself. What is also beautiful is the other side of the volunteers that come with us on these trips, because I think Mahrberg Library has no judgment of people. It's a very inclusive mindset that we have, which I really like. And I think in general, just people spending an extended amount of time together will encourage deeper conversations, and that you can't have on social media. You don't have these heart-to-heart conversations in the middle of the night of, what you think about the world, how you fit in, and all these sort of deep, meaningful conversations. You rarely have them on social media. So I think that is important as well, to encourage peace, essentially, creating good relationships and understanding of where people come from, because we all have our own stories. So
yes,
it's like
every time when I'm at the Mahrberg Library project, this deep connection you feel with the people. I've never experienced that before. For sure, you're faced with extreme challenges as well, and you're close together in a space which you are normally not. But at the end, I spent time with people. I was with them at school for 8 years, but I didn't get to know them as good as in the 2 weeks I traveled with them to countries and helped people in need. I think it's also the common goal you share, because in this time, you just want to do good. You just give the love you got. It's an unconditional kind of love you give as well to the volunteers and to the kids. And I think that's so beautiful and important, as you said, that you have these deep relationships.
And also because some of the projects takes us out of our comfort zone, which is also quite important for us to grow as people. And, being with other people when that happens, when we are uncomfortable and vulnerable, I think that also creates a certain layer of depth in the relationship, because normally when you meet up with friends, you're in a good mood, or you would have canceled. You only meet people when you are sort of up for it and you're looking forward to it, and it's all good and fun. But it's no secret, we are pushed to our limits sometimes, and things are uncomfortable, or we don't have hot water or electricity and all the other comforts that we normally have. And so that does something to people. It challenges people's comfort zone, out of their comfort zones. So I think that's another layer of sort of the relationship building.
Absolutely. And you speak about no electricity and no heat. So our last project took place in Nepal, and we both also traveled to Kathmandu first, and then to Okaldunga, 10 hours drive from the city, although it's only 240 kilometers. Was for me personally the most exciting journey of my life. And I wanted to ask you as well, how did you experience it, and what was really special
Walk in the park
about it?
Yeah, so my relationship with Nepal goes back to, I think, even before you were born. I went backpacking when I was young, and I know that I always wanted to go to Nepal. I think it was an idea planted in my head by my mom, but I knew I wanted to visit Nepal. And so I went trekking and sightseeing and ended up spending 6 weeks there the first time, and went back a couple of years later with my mom, actually. And then I started feeling sort of, I have to mention as well, the first time I entered Nepal, I came from India and we had to cross the border by land, by foot. And the first time I set foot in Nepal, I felt this sort of, I'm home. It was such a strange feeling, but I really felt comfortable. And I don't know if that was because I had left India, which was chaotic and hot and, just an attack on your senses, or if it was really because there was some sort of connection. And at that point, I hadn't really seen the country or met the people, because it was just crossing the border, and we had to stay the night and then move on the next morning. But yeah, as the time went on, I was so in awe of the way they, lived, so resilient with little means, but always smiling. And I know it sounds cliche, but it did have an effect on me. And so when I was there with my mom a couple of years later, I started feeling guilty about being this wealthy, rich European who could just buy her way through whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna give back. I really felt the need to give back to this country who'd given me so much beauty and great experiences. And I felt guilty about consuming. Mm-hmm. I needed to give back. So I wanted to return, but there was a civil war that broke out, and it lasted for 10 years, and you couldn't really go back as a tourist. And when the civil war was over,
When was this? Which year?
It was 96 to 2006.
Okay.
And when the war was over, it's still not immediately safe to go, mm-hmm. because the country is in turmoil and reeling from all the atrocities that had happened. And at the time, I also had a new job. I had just met the guy that I'm now married to, and so it wasn't
the guy,
time.
By the way.
So it wasn't the time for me. But in 2010, when we got married, my husband said, why don't we go to Nepal for our honeymoon? Because I need to see this country that you call your second home. So we embarked on a 3-week trip to Nepal. We did the Mount Everest Base Camp trek. And then he went back and I stayed for 2 months and I volunteered. And so when I got back, because this was sort of a dream of mine for many, many years, to give back and to be contributing and not just consuming, I thought, okay, now that's off my list. Do I then just go back to my 9-to-5 job and that's it? Or, what happens? But then I thought, no, I still feel that Nepal is part of me, who I am, and my life. I want it in my life still. So I set up a support organization to support the organization that I volunteered with back then. And so going there with Mahrberg Library last year was, sort of my two worlds converging. It was great that I could go with this organization and share sort of my passion for Nepal with the volunteers and the greater Mahrberg family. So, and I must say, it's funny because so we went to Okaldunga, which is a rural district in Nepal, and I think the first time I went there was in 2011. And it took us 1.5 days to get there. You know, there were no paved roads that like we had. So it
You
was
have to imagine we drove through rivers and lakes. It was crazy, really.
Yeah, watch our video.
Yes, it's on YouTube, by the way.
Our project video. But it was much more, it was much less developed, you know, 10 years ago. And so going there then, so in 2019, was a walk in the park. Like it was smooth sailing. It only took us 8-9 hours instead of 18. And, you know, we had electricity and internet connection at this community learning center where we stayed, which is my first time experiencing that in Okalunga in Nisanke. Before that, the first times I went there, there was no cell connection. And people were not connected to the grid at all. And we had hot water. I mean, it was very luxurious for me.
And not all the time hot water. Not all the time.
But the fact that there was,
Yes.
because normally, you know, you would just bathe in cold water.
But that's normal for you, right? So, so was this group also something special? So this project, because you did so many volunteer projects.
I think every project is special and every group is special, even with return volunteers, because it's not the same group that return or that is in each project, and because we all bring something different to the table, the dynamics are also different. Again, I was surprised, not surprised, but I was amazed by the fact that the group got on so well. There was no bickering and he said, she said, and like whispers in the corner and splitting of the group. Of course, there's always groups within the group, and that's normal, but it wasn't, there was no maliciousness. It wasn't, oh, over there, you know, he just did this and this. It was very inclusive again. And I remember the last night in Kathmandu where we had our sort of last reflection meeting, which is a great thing, by the way, that I really like, that we have reflection hour every day of the day that has passed. Also sharing tips with each other. But the last reflection meeting in Kathmandu was a very emotional one. And I think it just goes to show sort of what you gain from joining a project like Mahrberg Library project.
Absolutely. So with emotional, you mean everyone cried, right?
Well, I think mostly everybody.
And for our audience, I mean, Nepal, we basically built a community learning center, right, together with the nonprofit organization Volunteer Initiative
Small
Nepal.
correction. We didn't build the community learning center.
Yes.
But we did refurbish the library,
Yes.
a computer lab, and a children's activity room. So big project as well for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they're doing a great job, Vin, right? So you work with them for a long time already.
Yeah, so VIN, the partner organization to Mahrberg Library now, was the organization that I volunteered with back in 2010. And yeah, they do a good job. I like their approach to community development, which is a very holistic one, where they really consider all the different pillars of a community to affect and impact change.
And that's why we're partnering up with them, right? And we're now doing continuously English lessons with the kids there. Exactly. So there's another passion you have, basically. It's advocating also for women empowerment, because we also spoke about empowerment before through movements that are happening right now. Why are you so passionate about it?
I think it's not just women's empowerment. I think it's broader than that. It's actually just empowerment. However, in many communities and societies across the world, the women are more marginalized and have less rights than men, and therefore, so going back to, you know, the belief my parents had in me, or the belief that is important when you empower someone, is that they can do it and they have a right to do it, or to be who they are. And I think that in itself is the trigger for me. It's the empowerment itself. So yeah, but women, because traditionally women have less less sort of power
Sure,
in
absolutely.
our community.
And if we go on a very practical level, what can be done to empower people, and also what can every single one of us do in our everyday life to empower people, in your opinion?
I think it's probably easier said than done, but try not to be judgmental of people, and you know, tell people that you believe in them and that you support them in their journey. I think that's what we can all do on a daily basis. It's okay to challenge people, to ask questions, difficult questions, because that's also how the other person and yourself will grow. But essentially, you know, be supportive of people and do not judge them. I think that is sort of the first step in empowerment.
Okay, that's very cool. I will take it to my heart as well and try to be more aware about it, because I think it's oftentimes, even though maybe you do it on an everyday basis, it's good to be aware of it and reflect yourself.
Yeah, and it's natural, because when you find yourself maybe saying something that is sort of maybe derogatory or excluding of some, it's essentially your own insecurity that is speaking. And you know, we can't blame ourselves for that. We are just people. But if you are aware of it, I think that's a good start.
So you told us before that you were before in the corporate world, and as a side hustle, basically, you did the support of the Nepal project, where you help disadvantaged children. Is this job you have, in a sense, at Mahrberg Library, a dream come true? To invest yourself, to give back all the time, basically?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Okay. That's very cool, because it's, I have to say, since you're also on board at Mahrberg Library, it's a special energy as well, because you're such a bright lady and so powerful as well, that many people are surprised as well by the power you have to give as well. And I think it's a good role model for also the many volunteers that embark on this journey and support us in our mission also to give back, because eventually also at Mahrberg Wealth we want to do as much profit so that we can give as much back as possible. So Mahrberg Library is the end goal. Many don't know, but your German is great.
Ach so, Mensch.
It's
Quatsch
so
nicht.
good. Did you already learn some slang words, or some? Did you understand fallback people, Swiss people?
Sometimes.
Okay.
But if they go really deep into the dialect, I don't know what they're saying.
So it will be my mission in the next months to come that I'll teach you some fallback slang and Swiss slang. Okay.
Okay, deal.
There's one last question we always ask our guests, and because we, as a wealth managed company, as a family, as Mahrberg Library, it's important for us to reflect and ask us the question, what wealth means. So what does wealth mean to you, Anne?
Wealth to me is when you have more than you need. And I think the majority of people in Europe, maybe the US, Australia, Canada, have more than they need. And when I say need, it's basically a roof over your head, a bed to sleep in, and food on the table every day. So if you have more than that, sort of your basic needs covered, you should and could, and maybe you are even obliged to share some of your wealth, because you don't need it. You have what you need. So, yeah.
Very beautifully said. That's a good end to this very inspiring conversations. And I'm really thank you that we're together on this mission. And I'm sure that together with this great community, we will empower many children and bring change to many children's lives so that they can pursue their dreams and get a proper education, get access to the internet, and eventually bring peace to this world. Thank you very much for your time, the beautiful conversation, and I'm really looking forward to all the things we do together.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you for having me, for taking your time, and I am equally looking forward to changing the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.